The 34-inch ultra-wide gaming monitor segment has been really hot lately, and it just got hotter with this. Meet the BenQ MOBIUZ EX3415R. Just like many 34-inch ultra-wide gaming monitors, it's got a 1440p resolution, FreeSync Premium, and an IPS panel, so there's already a lot of similarities. But unlike those other monitors, this one has a lot of features that are carried over from the MOBIUZ EX2510 I reviewed a while back, which makes this one of my favorite 34-inch ultra-wides. To give you an idea of what I mean, let's start with what this monitor has that its competition doesn't, starting with the ambient light sensor. The monitor has a menu in the OSD called Eye Care, which has a couple of features including things like color weakness, which helps people with a color deficiency to distinguish color easier, low blue light, which pretty much every monitor has, and the one that I love the most, which is the automatic brightness adjustment. See, my main monitor is the LG 38 GN950, and while it's an epic monitor, one thing I hate is the software to control the monitor. It just sucks. So whenever it gets dark or bright outside and I want to adjust the monitor's brightness, I have to use the physical buttons. With the MOBIUZ, I don't have to do anything at all. Think of it as an auto headlight or auto wipers in your car. When you need it, it kicks in without you asking. I love being lazy. Then there's the speakers. Now, as you can see, I don't need monitor speakers anymore because I have dedicated speakers. But the reason I got the speakers in the first place is because I had no speakers to play audio for me and my missus so we can listen to something at the same time. Whether it's a YouTube video, something I'm editing, whatever, if I wanted her to listen to something, I had to give her my headset. This is obviously a non-issue with speakers. Now sure, they're not the best speakers. It only has dual 2-watt speakers and a 5-watt sub, so they're not very powerful, especially compared to my edifiers. But they're very good speakers as far as monitors are concerned. Take a listen. It's pretty good. They only get as loud as about 72 decibels on average, which isn't very loud, but it has decent trebles and mids but lacks bass. And that's fine because I don't think I want a sub shaking this monitor's internals, potentially committing Sudoku. Now there are some other features that this monitor has that are MOBIUZ specific, but they're not that great. For example, this has what's called HDRI or HDR intelligence. It's basically some algorithmic HDR, which is supposed to enhance the viewing experience, but I didn't notice anything when switching back and forth. That doesn't mean it doesn't do anything. There may be a slight difference when comparing them side by side, but if I can't notice a difference when switching back and forth, then I don't think it's a selling point of the monitor. Plus, this doesn't have full array local dimming, high enough brightness, and other HDR enhancing tech, so the HDRI really isn't something to write home about. Then there's the multiple inputs. This isn't really a MOBIUZ specific feature since it's really just picture-in-picture, but you get a couple of nice things like a 5:9 mode, so you can have your console on the left side of the screen with Twitch chat on the right. BenQ's words, not mine. Another thing I really like about this monitor is the panel. When I used it for the first time, I thought it was a Nano IPS panel because the colors were just so vibrant. But after talking to BenQ, they clarified it was just IPS. But I call BS. Not just because of the colors, but also because of the backlight strobing. If you don't know what backlight strobing is, basically it lowers the pixel response times. And if you want the explain like I'm 5 version, motion more clear. Let me show you what I mean. Take this chart for example. On the left picture, you have the reference UFO image. Everything else is what the monitor is actually displaying. The MOBIUZ has a total of 4 overdrive levels. Overdrive is a setting on gaming monitors which is supposed to make the image clearer by applying more voltage to the pixels. Whether the result is actually any good is up to how the manufacturer implemented it. Anyway, it also has backlight strobing, which I'll just label as BS. To keep it simple, the best overdrive level for this monitor is 2 of 3 if you can maintain a high frame rate all the time. But if you look at the dark grays, there's a little bit of overshoot. This is because the pixels are receiving a bit too much voltage, so it shoots past the color it's supposed to be before correcting itself. Overall though, it's not going to ruin the visual experience like the third setting. Now I know there's that occasional game that never gets high frame rates, Star Citizen. In which case, the best setting is one of three. If you leave it on the first setting, then you'll have zero overshoot even at 60 FPS with decent pixel response times, and you won't have to keep adjusting it from the second overdrive setting to the first overdrive setting every time you go from a high refresh rate game to a low refresh rate game. Plus, the difference isn't even big enough to notice a real difference when going from the first setting to the second setting, especially when you're immersed or focused in your games. Personally, I'm rocking one of three. But now we have the backlight strobing. I've taken away the third overdrive level and instead added the LG 34GP83A-B to give you an idea of how similar monitors with similar specs compare. Now, the reason why I think the MOBIUZ is actually Nano IPS instead of IPS is by looking at the backlight strobing results. First, Alex the Alien is much more clear, as expected, as that's the whole goal of backlight strobing. And unfortunately for the LG, it doesn't have any backlight strobing tech to compete with the MOBIUZ, so the MOBIUZ wins hands down. Second, Nano IPS panels that include backlight strobing have this red crosstalk / outline in front of Alex. Every other monitor I've tested that uses a different type of panel technology doesn't have this red. Only Nano IPS ones, including the new LG GP850 lineup of monitors I'll be posting a video on soon. So while BenQ does say it's IPS, I think they just got it mixed up. I'm inclined to believe it's Nano IPS, but they're the company making it and I'm just some random dude making YouTube videos. It's fun to speculate though. One really weird thing is the brightness situation. Usually when I test a monitor with backlight strobing, it decreases brightness, not increases it. But for some inexplicable reason, the MOBIUZ goes from 210 nits without backlight strobing to 304 nits with backlight strobing. This makes absolutely no sense. I asked BenQ why, and they said that 200 nits was the set maximum for production compliance, but the monitor can go as high as 400 nits when watching HDR, which you already know what I think about this monitor's HDR. I find this a bit of a weird response because the EX2510, which is the 24.5-inch 144Hz little brother to this beast, is basically the same monitor as this, but with a maximum brightness of 350 nits without HDR. Why is this so much darker? Whatever the reason, 210 nits is not a lot. It's not dark, but it's not bright. It can be an issue if you're in a bright room full of studio lights or sunlight, which was an issue for me in both settings, so I just ended up leaving backlight strobing on to keep it brighter. But that won't be a good solution for everyone because backlight strobing can cause some people to get eye strain or headaches. And if you know you're one of those people, then this is not a solution you want to deal with. If you don't know you're sensitive to this tech, well, good luck. If you use your monitor in extremely dark settings, it doesn't get very dark. 40 nits is where you want to be around, so you can comfortably use your monitor in dark settings for longer periods. You can lower the monitor's contrast ratio to make the display darker though, which is what I did. Honestly, I don't think this one's that big of a deal because if you're going for the lowest possible brightness anyways, you're not worried about contrast. Speaking of, contrast ratios were standard for this type of panel technology. It's not good, but it's not bad. It's just standard. Gamut coverage, on the other hand, was very good. It covers a pretty wide gamut, so whether you're a general consumer, photo editor, or video editor, you'll be very happy with the amount of color space coverage this monitor provides. It does oversaturate quite a bit though, and the MOBIUZ does include an sRGB mode to clamp the color gamut, which also makes the colors look a little more flat, at least initially. But that's the only gamut mode that this monitor includes. There's no Adobe RGB or P3 mode, so you professionals will need to get this calibrated. This becomes more clear when you see its color accuracy. With an average delta E of 3.43, it's not inaccurate, but it's not perfect. For the average person who's just playing games, watching movies, or doing amateur video editing, this is totally fine, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're doing any intermediate or high-level color work, you'll want to get it calibrated. When calibrated, colors were extremely accurate. With an average delta E of 0.64 and a max of 1.63, color accuracy is basically perfect. But for some reason, I could only get the results this good in the sRGB mode. If I use the custom color mode, which lets me adjust the RGB values, color accuracy performed similarly to uncalibrated. It only did that in the color charts though, because if we look at the grayscale chart, that was fixed. Sure, calibrating the sRGB mode did still do better than the calibrated custom color mode, but the differences here are marginal. One thing this monitor did really poor, and I do mean really poor, is the uniformity. I've never seen something with delta E's as high as this. The bottom left corner of the display was basically perfect, but everything else was just bad, at least on paper. Even though it technically does pour, I actually didn't notice it to be that bad at all. Also, IPS glow looked as standard as it gets, and there was no backlight bleed with my particular unit. Viewing angles were fantastic. There was no angle discoloration or high contrast effect when looking from any angle, just a slightly less bright screen. Overall, color performance on this monitor was pretty good out of the box. Not exceptional, just pretty good. And as someone who's used to calibrated displays, I was totally happy with the default performance that this monitor offered, probably because of the Nano IPS-like oversaturation. I'm a fan of accurate oversaturation, or saturation. Keep in mind that even if you buy the same monitor, all the stuff that I just mentioned will vary from unit to unit. Your uniformity could be better than mine, your color accuracy could be worse, and so on. It really just comes down to the panel lottery. Now with that said, if you want to try my color profile for yourself, I'll leave a link in the video description. Just keep in mind, it was made for my personal display, not yours, so it might not correct all of your issues. If it does, well then, good. Now, when it comes to gaming on the Mobius, this is where it excels. First off, input lag is very low, so you don't have to worry about the mouse smoothing effect. And like I showed you earlier, pixel response times are very low because of the inclusion of backlight strobing. I feel like it's Diac from the Giuli lineup of monitors. It's that good, but they're not branding it as Diac, just blur reduction. The backlight strobing benefits this monitor has are unmatched compared to much of the competition. One thing I noticed though is that when I moved my eyes quickly left or right or any direction, I can see that red backlight strobing outline around white text, objects, etc. It didn't bother me, but it's worth pointing out. Second, and I've said it before, playing on an ultrawide actually gives you a more immersive gaming experience that a 16:9 display just can't provide. And if you're like me and use a monitor arm, you can pull the monitor as close as you want to really separate you from the world around you. It'll cover most, if not all, of your periphery. Now, if you're the ultra competitive type, well then I have no clue why you're looking at an ultrawide. You should be looking at 1080p 240Hz or 360Hz displays. If you don't want one though, and instead want that sweet real estate, then you'll be very happy with how responsive this monitor is. Just don't expect to be competing at the absolute highest level of competitive gaming. What's also annoying are these black bars on Valorant and probably some other games. It's 2021, fix your game, Riot. Why do you let me choose 21:9 mode and then proceed to give me black bars? Anyway, if you're the competitive type, then you'll also appreciate the black equalizer. Just like the EX2510, I'm pretty sure this EX3415R carries the black equalizer over from the Giuli lineup of monitors because it performs phenomenally. Here's with the black equalizer off, then set to 5, then 10. It also has a color vibrance feature which lets you crank the color saturation, which is very handy to bring out the colors in grayscale-ish games. However, the only profile you can use the black equalizer in is the FPS profile. Otherwise, you're stuck with the light tuner, which performs basically the same. So whichever one you use, you'll be able to see all those pesky shadow campers. In terms of the game I'll be replacing Escape from Tarkov with, you guys made it clear that you wanted Warzone. But since I need 23 other players to do a private test without being shot at, I'll do Modern Warfare instead since it's the same game. All I need from you is to tell me which map is the best for the black equalizer tests. Also, no guarantees I'll have any friends with a rose skin, because I have no friends. Lastly, we have the OSD and design. The OSD on this monitor is very robust and easy to use. You can either control it from the nipple or with the included remote, which also includes a battery. It has a power, source, directional, OK, HDRI, quick game mode color profile selector, picture-in-picture, menu, audio mode, and volume buttons. Press the menu button or any of the navigation buttons to access the quick settings, then go down to menu to access the full OSD. Here we have your input sources, quick menu to set up your shortcuts, and color mode, which is your color profile. Once you select your color mode, you can adjust everything within that mode. Custom lets you adjust basically everything except for the black equalizer, so I'll just stick it to custom for this part. First we have the light tuner, color vibrance, brightness, contrast, sharpness, BI+, which is the auto screen brightness, gamma, color temp, AMA, blur reduction, and reset. Again, if you want to adjust the black equalizer, you need to use the FPS profile. I wouldn't worry too much about it though because the light tuner is basically the same thing. Next we have the picture-in-picture mode, which is called multiple input, then eye care, which has BI+, low blue light, color weakness, and adjust by duration, which adjusts the color temperature depending on how long you've used the monitor to reduce eye strain. Then we have audio, which has your volume, audio modes, which I gave examples of earlier, and mute. And lastly, system settings, which just has your typical system settings. Now, while I think the remote is cool, I think BenQ should go the software route. Many companies have a software for their monitor, although most are getting rid of it at the same time. And I think it's just easier using a mouse that's already in your hands, click an icon in your taskbar, and quickly adjust. Maybe I'm just the only one who cares about this stuff, but I think it would be cool, and it could lower the cost of the monitor, really. Lastly is the design. It's a very good looking monitor. The monitor has legs instead of a square or circular base, so it takes up quite a bit of desk space, although not as much as some other monitors with legs. Credit to BenQ for getting rid of that connecting bar that the EX3510 had. The legs are made of metal and covered in this silver and orange plastic. The stand is square-ish, is also made of metal and covered in plastic, and it has a wire routing hole. The back of the monitor is probably my favorite design of any monitor. Sure, the gamer aesthetic is cool, but I love this simple, clean, symmetrical design. On the top you have the 5-watt sub, and on the corner you have some MOBIUZ branding. Personally, I think the branding would have been better on the chin. This chin is massive, but for a reason. It's what houses the speakers and the ambient light sensor, as well as the HDRI button to quickly toggle through your HDRI modes. The bezels are your standard thin bezels. It's got tilt, height, swivel, but no pivot. It has 100 by 100 VESA mounting holes, so you can mount it to a monitor arm or stand. And for I/O, it has 2 HDMI ports, a DisplayPort 1.4 port, a headphone jack, and a 2-port USB 3.1 hub. So with all that said, what do I think of this monitor, and is it worth the price? Well, I think it's a very good ultrawide. It's my favorite 34-inch in fact, but before I can say if it's worth the price, you gotta know how much it costs. It's $1,000. Now hold on, don't click away from the video just yet because it is worth the price. Think about it, the closest competitor is the LG 34GN850, which is the same as the LG 34GP83A-B I reviewed, but with slightly worse pixel response times and a lower HDR peak brightness. But the 34GN850 is also $1,000, doesn't include backlight strobing, has a worse black equalizer, so overall it's not as good for competitive gaming, doesn't have an ambient light sensor, and doesn't include speakers. And because they're the same price and the MOBIUZ offers more features that I actually care about, I'd go with the MOBIUZ over the GN850 or even the GP83A-B. I don't know if you care about these small features as much as I do, but if you do, then the MOBIUZ is the one to get. If you don't, then maybe the $800 GP83A-B is better for you. One thing that I need to reiterate though is the maximum brightness. I'm fortunate enough not to be sensitive to backlight strobing, and because I get better pixel response times and a 30% increase in maximum brightness with backlight strobing enabled versus disabled, the 210 nit peak brightness without backlight strobing won't be an issue for me because I'll just keep it on. But if you think that it'll be an issue for you, then it might not be the best because 210 nits is at the point where you just wish you had a little bit more brightness when the sun is attacking your monitor. Other than that, this has everything you need in one package, doing a lot of those things very well, offering more than its competitors while staying at the same price. And sure, if you just want an ultrawide, you could buy one of those cheapo 34-inch VA panel-based ultrawides. I've reviewed one, but if you think you're gonna get anywhere near the MOBIUZ or even the LG in terms of performance, viewing experience, and useful features, you're greatly mistaken. Gotta pay to play. If you're interested in any of the stuff I featured in this video, I'll leave links in a video description. If you have any feedback on how to improve my videos, comment your comments in the comments section. Thanks for watching and have a great day every day. Peace.